The Cowper Newton Museum opened in 1900 on the centenary of the death of William Cowper. Poet, man of letters, translator of Homer, and he was famous in his own lifetime. But John Newton is the Rev'd John Newton, and he became the curate in charge at the age of 39 in the church just over the way here at St. Peter and St. Paul. Before coming to Olney in 1764, he had been from the age of 11 on ships with his father as a merchant sailor, but he'd also been a slave trader, both in the land-based slave trade in Sierra Leone and later as first mate and then a captain of a slave ship. It was in a storm at sea in 1748 on his way back from Africa to England that he had his epiphany, but it was a long journey for John. But that storm at sea was very much the journey back to his faith when God, as he said, came back to him. And he studied and he talked to people until he decided in Liverpool, where he became a surveyor of the tides, that he would like to be ordained, and that was his journey in life. The Church of England didn't want him. But finally, through a patron, Lord Dartmouth, who had the church here, he was offered a post. First post, as I said, at the age of 39, and came to Olney. The hymn that we now know as Amazing Grace, that was written by John Newton, probably in December 1772.
Amazing Grace as a hymn has profoundly complex history, and it does for one of two reasons. One, as we know, Newton was a slaver who was involved in the buying and selling or trafficking of black Africans for a number of years. He has that history, and he writes Amazing Grace, which is a hymn, ironically, that has gone on to be beloved amongst sections of the diasporic African communities that are the descendants of those that Newton enslaved. So there is a complexity to the hymn that is inherent to it.
John had already chosen a Bible quotation on which to base his sermon, and that is 1 Chronicles, chapter 17, particularly verses 16 and 17.
It is a joy and a pleasure to be back here with you in this amazing space that once was the home, the spiritual home of John Newton. On the 1st of January 1773, John Newton drew on the readings we had today for the text of his sermon. Today, 250 years later, we reflect on the same text. Our reading from Chronicles provides us with a window into the soul of David and his relationship with God.
So we have got a sermon, the Amazing Grace sermon, and we've got the Amazing Grace hymn. And it's ideal for New Year's Day because that Bible verse is about looking to the past, reflecting on the day, and looking to the future. And that's very much what Amazing Grace is doing as well. John is reflecting back on his life, his coming back to God, or God coming back to him. Back in 2019, the museum was future planning. Suddenly we noticed that it was going to be the 250th anniversary of the Amazing Grace sermon and the Amazing Grace hymn. The AG 250 programme started back in July 2022, and the programme has included so many community projects, such as 100 people coming together to sew the Amazing Grace quilt, the Amazing Grace Community Orchard that is opening, an exhibition here with the Sierra Leone community on the vibrant culture and art of Sierra Leone.
I was very, very proud to show off Sierra Leone culture in the museum. Yeah, there was a lot of things there as well on display. We have Milton Keynes Sierra Leone Committee, that I'm the vice chairman of that group. This is a small group, but we are trying to build it up. We bring Sierra Leoneans together here in Milton Keynes. Sierra Leone, culture of Sierra Leone is very, very global in a sense, because during the slave trade, we have a lot of migrants that went to Sierra Leone from other countries, mixed people from all over West Africa and the Caribbean as well, went to Africa during those days. The capital of Sierra Leone is called Freetown, and they gave it that name because of the freed slaves in the capital city. That is where that name comes from. It is important because, especially as most of us who give birth to our kids in Europe, they don't know most of our African cultures. They know the food, but they don't know them much. So when we gather together as African Diaspora Festival, they bring us all together. We speak more of our dialects and we meet more different cultures. And Amazing Grace project is linked directly with Sierra Leone because of John Newton. Because of him, they named that town there. Yeah, and it was to my amuse that when I came here as well in England, especially in Olney, I knew that I'm very, very close to home because I knew Newton in Sierra Leone, and I came to know Newton here as well in Olney, and I'm part of that John Newton Heritage Committee as well.
The one big project that really has been the backbone, the heart, is the commissioning of a new piece of music that responds to the question, what does Amazing Grace mean to people today?
My thoughts and feelings when I was first approached was excitement and honoured to be asked, excited and honoured to have an opportunity to be part of AG 250 and to contribute creatively. And then, of course, excited and honoured to work with Roderick Williams again.
I think the interesting thing for me is responding to this commission as a musician, because I'm attracted to Amazing Grace primarily through the melody. I'm sure that's how a lot of musicians access this. It's such an iconic melody that the whole point of the brief was to commemorate the words and not the melody, which is attached to it much later. So the melody is incredibly strong, incredibly powerful, the shape of it, because I guess of its folk nature. So I knew that to refer to that would be to almost obliterate everything else. But not to refer to it would also leave a great question mark. So I had a feeling that I needed to deal with that at the outset of the piece, and that's what I did in the overture. And the first movement is to refer to the melody and then leave that alone, so that we can concentrate then wholly on the words.
I'm also somebody that's very profoundly curious about and interested in human stories, and I'm fascinated by the ways in which that hymn sits in people's lives. And that's why I used interviews as my method during the creation process for Forever. I wanted to find out what a cross-section of contemporary British society feels and thinks about Amazing Grace.
The New Music Commission also included two other strands. One was that community choir singers will get the opportunity to sing one song of the 10 prior to the premiere on the 22nd of July.
There was an amazing thing about this particular song as well, about number 8 in the Forever. It's actually 3 poems in one. So it's the song about the two different people from Sierra Leone who have very different reactions or stories attached to the song Amazing Grace.
Thank you very much for coming to our final rehearsal of the 4-week.
It means a lot to me, for each person to feel involved. So it's a bit like spinning plates. So you make sure that the people over there have something to think about while these people are learning their bit. And you don't spend too long with them because this person is waiting to have their bit. And then fill in the gaps and make sure you don't leave anything to chance. Gotta get it right now. So there's a bit of planning goes on, but then also a bit of flying by the seat of your pants. If the plan goes wrong, you've got to have something else to back it up. But you've got to know the music really well. If you know the music well, you have all those choices laid out in front of you.
With the museum on, and it's getting to a conclusion now, but this project has been developed over many months. So this new piece of music will be performed by the Chineke Ensemble at the stables on the 22nd of July.
Well, thank you so much to the choir behind me. Thank you very much to Craig McLeish. And I must thank, in addition to the stables and Cowper Newton Museum and Amanda and Monica and everyone else, I really must take this opportunity to thank Tim German, because this project was came from an original idea proposed by him. What you have here is an utter delight, which is there's the biggest ensemble of people that are going to sing an extract from that, where they're going to sing Song 8.
Singing the words in a Methodist church, on a long paved road in Freetown, where everyone dressed for the first Sunday service. We return each declaring ourselves through song.
250 people who've given their time, talent, dedication, coming together to sing my words. And to sing Roddy's music. I think that's such a wonderful thing. And given that the purpose and the intention of this project was to create a new choral work, new repertoire for choirs in Olney, Milton Keynes and in other areas, well, that in and of itself achieves that, and that's just wonderful. The first thing that we're going to do is think about John Newton, but he is not the focus. We're not celebrating John Newton. AG 250 is not about celebrating John Newton. It's about commemorating the fact the hymn was written. It's about asking questions of the hymn. And it's about acknowledging what the hymn means to lots of different people in the 21st century. So I'm going to be running an immersive workshop which will use all kinds of subtle drama techniques and creative writing techniques to engage young people to think about protest and also to think about the metaphors of their right to vote. The power of the vote is really important politically, and also the power to have access to write and read and express oneself through those forms is political. And oftentimes I think lots of people forget those things until they don't have them anymore.
So far we have had our kind of introduction session and introduced ourselves to all the young people. And then we've also had a workshop with Dr. Romy Smith, who was talking about the transatlantic slave trade and how it relates to the Amazing Grace hymn.
So in the house we learned about John's later life, so when he was much older, after he retired from the Navy, the slave trade, when he was starting to realise that the slave trade really wasn't the best for the world and he was starting to make amends.
When I first found out about him being a slave trader, I knew a little bit about it, but I grew some resentment with finding out about it, but over time it lessened seeing how he changed and shifted towards an abolitionist mindset.
They have a sense by the end of the workshop about how they can use their voices to change things, because that's important for people to have an understanding that politically they can change things.
It was a good experience. I really was happy to just see different people learning and being there to learn too.
I found it absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed working with other young people from Milton Keynes.
Oh, it's great. Well, it's like Christmas every time I go to the workshop because, you know, I start with something on paper and then it's like, whoa, look at that. It's real now. So honestly, it is never a disappointment. It's always a revelation. So we chose a material called Corten, which is, it's a steel, it's an alloy, and it's designed to go rusty. And the patina of the rust maintains the integrity of the steel. So it also has quite an organic look. And one of the references in the museum was a template for lace making, which was a brown piece of parchment with little pricks through, which you use as your template. So that single piece of parchment was a really big influence on the artwork. And I honed that down to some fairly simple patterns, looked at how that could complement the words and also be included in the artwork. So it's really a jumping off point for a wider story that Olney has to tell. And it was delving deep into the sort of historic past and unwrapping that history to try and tell that story in a different way so that people could interrogate the artwork, look at the story, go to the museum and understand a little bit more about the story and hopefully be a little bit inspired.
Here you go, Steve. Nice and grace, looking rather splendid. Obviously it won't have the tube eventually. That's our setting up.
Singing in a choir, you use so much of your senses. You use your hearing, you use your sight, you use your emotions, you use your memory. It keeps you young. Well, it certainly has been keeping me young. And when I don't go to choir, I can feel the difference. Singing is very important to me. My parents both sang. My father played the piano, and I was the one child of the three of us that gravitated to this. And strange enough, he used to play Amazing Grace, and I used to sing it along with him, but the words had no meaning to me at that time. But it became a favorite of mine because my father used to sing it to me, and I used to sing it along with him. Some people see it as a song. I don't. Every word I can identify with. I get very emotional. I love to sing this song, and I might even cry while I'm singing the song, and people might ask, what's the matter? Nothing is the matter. I don't know why I'm crying. I'm crying because I identify with the song.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
I didn't know about the complicated history until I started preparing for this. That is why when Romy came and read the poem, I learned some new things. I learned some people were angry. Some people thought things I didn't think. But it opened my eyes to see those things, but it made me look at the song again, and I do identify with some things that came out of those interviews.
I'm acknowledging that this is a hymn for many people that feels as though it's been around forever. And in that way, it feels like a comfort. It feels like a coat or family to people. But then there's a question mark, because There were people within the interviews that I did who feel, should we sing this hymn forever? ? Newton wasn't just a curate, he was a curate of souls. So the curate of souls authors Amazing Grace, and yet he has this history of having enslaved souls, beings, people. And so it was profoundly important for me that there was an acknowledgement of conflicting perspectives, contrasting perspectives, the difficult within these songs.
Tonight is our final rehearsal. Leon Bosch, the conductor, is coming for his second week. I'm going to get the formation sorted, so we're going to reenact what's going to happen tomorrow in terms of where we're standing and sitting. We're going to go through all the elements of the piece. I hope Leon will be happy, because obviously I've got to hand over to him. What he says goes. He's now going to decide how the performance goes, what speed we take, who does what where, and we've got to learn what his gestures are and what his personality is so that we can get on alongside him and get his vibe and his direction. Yeah, really important.
I'm connecting very well because it's different to anything else I have sung, and I have been singing with choirs for quite a long time. But now we know the story, and you can tell that we are putting passion into it, we're putting feeling into it because we know the story, and we identify with the people's answers.
It's completely understood and not underestimated the impact and reach of this piece and its pertinence and relevance to audiences beyond only in Milton Keynes.
Part of. I mean, we are performing in one of the world's leading venues, with one of the world's leading ensembles, with a premiere by one of the world's leading baritones and composers and lyricists. It doesn't get much bigger than that. So it's a huge honour.
I will sing for the rest of my life as long as I'm able. I could not do without singing in a choir. And I emphasize choir because it's different to singing a solo. And it's such a privilege to be a part of this whole thing. So not only is it the highlight of my singing in choirs, it's the highlight of my life. I find it unbelievable that I'm even being interviewed here.
It gave light to thousands and thousands and millions others. So let's, as we celebrate this 250th anniversary, let's make this amazing grace make a difference in our lives and know that by God's amazing grace, we are who we are, saved, redeemed, forgiven, so that we too may become conduits, channels for others.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, and now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me, his word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. Yes, when this flesh and heart shall fail, and mortal life shall cease, I shall possess within the veil a life of joy and peace. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine.